All right, let's take this DAX section to the finish line with some best practices. First, don't use calculated columns when measures will do the trick. So only use calculated columns when you're looking to create new data and actually stamp static fixed values to each row in a table. On the other hand, use measures when aggregation is necessary or to create dynamic values to use in a report or a visual. Next, get in the habit of writing measures for even the simplest calculations, like the sum of orders or the sum of sales. Once you create a measure, you can use it anywhere in the report, as well as an input to other more complex calculations, which we've seen many times at this point. So a rule of thumb, try to avoid using implicit measures by simply dragging those raw fields into a visual. Next up, as you're learning DAX, try to break down measures into simple component parts. DAX is a unique language and it's a very difficult one to get a grasp of. So focus on practicing and understanding the simplest components at first, and then work on assembling them into more advanced formulas. Finally, I'd recommend referencing your columns with the table name and your measures by themselves. So using those fully qualified column references not only helps make your formulas more readable and intuitive, but it helps to differentiate them from your measure references. Now, last but not least, I want to cover some quick speed and performance considerations as well. Now, these will come into play especially if you're dealing with very large or complex data sets. So number one, aim to eliminate redundant columns and keep your data tables narrow. Your data tables really should ideally only contain quantitative values and foreign keys. If you have extra descriptive columns in those data tables, those can usually live in a related lookup table. Next, imported columns are generally better than calculated columns. So if you have a means to do so, creating calculated columns at the source, like in SQL or Access if you're dealing with a database source, is more efficient than creating those calculations either in the query editor or in your data model. And then last but not least, try to minimize iterator functions whenever possible. These functions like filter, sumx, averagex, etc. that cycle through each row in a table are expensive, meaning that they take time and they consume processing power, especially if they're cycling through very, very large tables. So if you're experiencing performance lags with your model, that might be a good first place to check. So that officially wraps up the DAX section. Next up, we've got some homework exercises, and from there we'll shift gears, start getting creative, and work on visualizing our data with Power BI reports.